Welcome everyone to SEO Office Hours. My name is Michael Chidzey. I'm an SEO here at Good Signals. And part of what we do, along with special guests, are these Office Hours sessions, where people can jump in and ask their questions around their website and web search. By the way, nobody here is in the hot seat and we might not know all the answers, but multiple heads thinking about a problem should help. We have a bunch of questions submitted already, as you can see. I think these are the most amount of questions we've had so far. We'll see how many we get through. But if there's anybody live here on the call who would like to ask any questions, feel free to flag yourself in the chat functionality, which will be monitored. Also, we usually have a bunch of SEOs watching on the call, and please feel free to continue sharing your perspectives. I think that's one of the best things about SEO Office Hours, isn't just the fact that you've got the 4 speakers here, but we've also got loads of other perspectives from others. So please keep doing that. So you might have noticed Joe's not with us this week. Instead, we have Natalia. Morning, Natalia. How's it going?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to say straight away, I'm not replacing Joe. I'm just filling in for this week. And I'm also not a third Turnbull sister, obviously. Yeah, thanks for having me this week.
No problem. So would you mind introducing our guests? Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll start with myself just because I didn't even say what I do. And probably most of the listening don't know who I am. So I'm Natalia Witczyk, based in Barcelona, originally from Poland. And I specialize in international SEO. Obviously, languages can help. So living in Spain, using my Polish skills, sometimes English. And I'm here today joined by 2 fantastic guests. First one is David, who's been here before and has worked in SEO for many years. I'm not going to say how many, but apparently pre-Ask Jeeves. So probably half of the audience is asking, what's Ask Jeeves? And the other one is, was there anything before Ask Jeeves? So David, tell us a bit more. What was the SEO time like before that?
It was much more the directories back then. This is pre-Google, this is pre a lot of the directories coming out. And this was especially around 96, 97, I launched a e-commerce website. And so it was trying to get visibility online, whatever that meant at the time. In all fairness, there were probably only a few 100,000 websites online at that time, so it was a little bit easier.
It all sounds very different to today's landscape,
Yes,
that's for
very.
sure. I'm going to add that David now works as the digital lead at Forster's LLP, and he oversees the strategy and delivery of digital marketing for the group.
Yeah.
And we're looking forward to hearing your insights today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Now also we have Sean Barber, who is SEO manager at Macmillan Cancer Support. And he's very active on social media, has got his own YouTube channel, actually also just joined James Brockbank on a podcast the other day, very active SEO community member. And also on top of usual SEO activity, just participated in London Mighty Hike for Macmillan Cancer Support. So quite impressive. How do you find time to do anything, Sean?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids as well, so I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't really sleep much. That's the so yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, fantastic. Great you are with us today. And I think we're ready to kick off with our questions.
Great. Just before we do, so Natalia shared with us her first website. Are we allowed to share it in the chat, Natalia? As we were talking?
Oh, yes,
I did not
please.
expect this, but why not?
Is that allowed? Can I share it? This isn't an SEO question. We don't need to do an audit, don't worry. But we were just talking about, just before it started, about our first websites. And I said mine was on GeoCities. So thankfully I can't find it anywhere. And then Natalia shared hers. And you were just saying you've got no idea what it's about.
It's about nothing. I just found a bunch of GIFs and I thought it would be funny to use them in a notepad coded, all caps, HTML code in 2002. So please don't judge.
No, I remember when on my first website, I was saying that basically I had to rely on emailing people and hope they would just email other people and so on. Thankfully, it's a lot easier to find websites now, so that's good. Let's dive straight in because, as I said, we've got loads of questions. Question number 1. Okay, this is a nice, simple one. Please, can you clarify if I'll get charged for each subdomain of a domain? So, for example, do I pay for, if it's our domain, do I pay for blog.goodsignals.com, careers.goodsignals.com, help.goodsignals.com, and www.goodsignals.com? No. I'm just going to jump in. Does anybody else want to add anything else? Go for it, David.
I know some hosting companies will charge, especially after a certain number, but generally speaking, no.
Great. Sean, you're looking confused. You disagree?
Other things come into play like SSL certificate and hosting and things or other additional costs. Just consider that.
Good point. And if you're running different CMSs and things like that as well, and there might be a cost associated with that. Okay, next question. I've come across an issue on my Google Search Console account regarding certain pages not indexing. May I ask you and your colleagues if you could provide guidance on this issue? And this is from Somerset Balloons. I think, Nat, you're on the call. I think I can see you. Hi. Cool. Nat kindly shared their Google Search Console with us, which I passed on. If I'm honest, I haven't had a proper look, so I'll have a look after this and come back to you if we haven't got an answer. Sean, I think you said you had a chance to have a look and it was around pages that are crawled but not indexed, right?
Yeah, and this stuff I'm looking at as well myself across all different domains that we have. And I use tools like Botify to kind of like these, well, obviously Search Console. You know, I did have a look and I couldn't look at every single URL because that would just take forever. But the general sort of what I saw was many of them can just be dismissed. I don't think are worth worrying about to that extent. I think obviously there's a couple of key pages. You know, sometimes you come around some key pages that you would like to get, you know, indexed and seen on more visibility on, but they're very thin on content. And that's going to make it extremely hard for them to get picked up. And perhaps there could be, when you see important pages that aren't being indexed, look at the content, look at how relevant it is, how informative it is, and internal linking, is it internally linked correctly, and that kind of thing. Apart from that, I did see perhaps some issues with canonical-based pages that could be looked. So mainly, obviously, looking at the website, I don't think that's the main problem I'll be focusing at this stage. There's a couple of pages there that I would pick up on, but generally, it's not any huge issues.
Okay, what I'm going to do, because we have loads of SEOs on the call, as we're going through the other questions, I'll put some of the example URLs that have been picked up in Search Console as crawled but not indexed. Google isn't, when you actually go into these URLs and inspect them in Search Console, usually it gives you an idea if it's a canonical problem or something like that. So I'll have a look at them and do a screenshot of those particular ones and share, because maybe by the end of the call, some others might have some thoughts as well. Okay, so somebody's already said the first one that I've shared is a 404. So that's a good start.
Yeah, there's a few 404s in there.
Okay, cool. So we'll jump on to another question and we'll have a look as we're going, so it's not a silent call whilst we're all investigating. Okay, so I think the next two questions are actually linked. So we'll start with this one. We recently switched to Sitecore, and since then our rankings have taken a slight hit. Other than the platform change, we haven't made any adjustments. We suspect the new platform might be the culprit, but we're not entirely sure. Has anybody else experienced this, or could it be something else? Natalia, how do you feel about starting with this one?
Yeah, so actually Sitecore is one of the CMSs I've worked most with at some point in my career. And it's a tricky one. So I absolutely want to share my sympathy with the person who is on the other side of this question and basically tell them that essentially Sitecore is as good as the developers behind it, because you have to solve every single aspect of any idea you have about duplication, URL resolves, anything. There has to be thought behind it and design behind it. It's not a given. It's all absolutely unique to every website. So it might just be that the developers that prepared this Sitecore instance, they've just not prepared capital letters to sentence size letters resolves, basic 301s, when you just expect them when you have used WordPress all your life. So I would say probably the most relevant question here is, what was the previous system like? What technology was it on? Because Sitecore is .NET, which is very different from our usual PHP websites. And probably just dig into the basics of technical SEO here, because it might be that many things are failing and you wouldn't even expect them to. Just to give you an idea, one Sitecore website that was one of the first migrations I worked on, I realized that the developers are 301 redirecting to a 404 page that later serves a 404 error code instead of the basic 404 response code. Just because when they see the result, it's a 404, they think it's a 404. But it obviously messed up the whole crawling because it was 301 first. So yeah, really the basics could be failing you there.
I think Simon's made a valid comment there in the chat. Any migration will cause a drop. There's so much changing when you do a migration. Whether it's the CMS, whether it's redirects, they can all have an impact to a greater or lesser extent. So there's a lot to look through on that one, I think.
Great. Sean, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we use Sitecore for the majority of our sites. And, it is a quite complex CMS system compared to other, if I use Shopify and stuff in the past. I would agree that any migration you're going to expect, no matter how good you think you've done it, how thorough you've been, you will see an initial drop. But yeah, like for example, the redirect tools on Sitecore are quite complex. So you're going to have to get handle of those things, make sure they're all correct. But yeah, I'll just echo what's been said. But I'll just be patient. Something we lack in SEO sometimes is patience. So just stick with it and see if it continues, and then try and look in the back end and see if there's any major issues that you can find.
Great. And like I said, we have a related question, which is our new content management system provider has indicated that we may experience a temporary dip in traffic. Could you share if this aligns with your experiences? So from David, from what you were saying, you've already answered that question.
I think migrations are tricky in general, and it depends how much you're migrating. I've worked on projects where it's been everything from CMS to brand change to URL change to domain change. Every single one of those can cause issues, can cause a drop. I think it's trying to build out the best change management through the whole project. I have worked on some where any drop has been absolutely minimal. Sometimes there's a very brief drop and it starts to rise quite well. So it's a tricky one because it is so variable depending on what you're changing.
Just to speak on that, because we've literally done a couple of migrations quite recently, and we went from like Umbraco to Sitecore, and it was literally a lift and shift in terms of the content. But Sitecore has completely different templates and ways of function compared to Umbraco. Although the content is exactly the same pretty much, all the navigation.
Sorry to interrupt, Sean. I don't know if you've got your hand on the microphone. It could just be me, by the way.
No.
I think,
Oh, yeah, you're back now. Great.
Okay, yeah. So where did I get to? I don't know.
So you were saying that you migrated to Sitecore and then it started to dip in terms of...
So I was just saying, yeah, because Sitecore has completely different templates. Even though it's the same content, it's completely different templates and the way the content out there. So what I'm saying is you need to work in collaboration with UX, with the development team and so on, and understand what the changes there are being made and what their plans are and stuff. So if any with this, they're trying to warn you because they know there'll probably be a dip because it's a migration. But generally what I'm trying to yeah, it's going to happen, but you need to understand what the other teams are doing and what they're expecting to see as well, and what they're doing against any problems that might come up.
Great. It's hard to sort of say this. The majority of migrations that I've worked on have been fine, but I always prepare for the worst. And I think you just have to make sure you've got everything covered. The less significant the change, the easier it is. And I try and sometimes it's a case of ripping off the Band-Aid and doing everything. But ideally, if you're changing CMS, it's quite nice to try and change it and then make those other changes. I have also experienced awful migrations. And I think the main thing there is be prepared to roll back and make sure you really push for that if you're the SEO on the team or if organic traffic is important to you. And don't let the highest paid person in the room just make those decisions, because it's something that what you don't want to be doing is 6 months time going, why didn't we just roll back and fix those temporary issues that we had? Natalia, have we got anything in the chat with regards to this one?
Yeah, I think the migrations were not a big subject of the discussion yet. I'm not seeing many answers. But while people type, I'll maybe say that I heard one theory when debating some SEO topics with other SEOs that I really liked. And now this is not confirmed information. This is just my kind of approach towards this. It looks like sometimes the bigger the link profile of a website, the longer it might take for the migration to fully kick in. So someone shared this theory with me, and actually I'm swayed to think that maybe Google has to reflect the backlinks first in the crawling, and then the redirects if the URL have changed. to actually give them the full value again. There has been this kind of idea that maybe it takes longer for really big backlink profile websites that depend on backlinks mostly as one of the stronger signals.
But if it's got a huge backlink profile, does that not indicate that it might just be a larger, more complex website? And therefore,
There's a correlation. Who knows?
yeah, interesting. Does anybody else want to add anything else on this, either on the switching to Sitecore or?
I just want to say about the migrations, I think the rollback, the plan B, is an element which is often forgotten. It should be part of the plan. It is a almost worst case scenario, but don't be afraid to use it. It can save a lot of pain further down. And again, Simon Cox has mentioned how using Looker Studio, you can keep track of before and after, how stuff has moved around, and that's another great one just to keep a track of stuff, especially in those first few weeks.
And prior, there's testing and staging environments that you should be able to test everything to make sure when you go like the issues aren't hopefully will come up.
We actually have Simon defending Sitecore here, saying it's a great CMS and there should be no problem migrating to it from anything. So someone has had good experience, I can see.
Great. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Yeah, we're not here to bash. We like everybody. So we like all CMSs. Okay, next one. I'm checking our Ahrefs and I spotted a ton of sketchy links pointing to our site. And these are recent sketchy links, all about black and white hat casino stuff. And they list some of our competitors. They've given us a URL, which, Natalia, have you got the URL? Would you mind putting it in the chat? Is that all right? So this is just one of many links that have recently started pointing to their website. And it's basically a small intro followed by a long list of exactly the same links that are mostly casino-like links. What they want to know is, should they do something about it, or should they just shrug it off and essentially hope that Google ignores them? Has anybody else experienced this, where they feel like somebody is pointing a load of sketchy links at their website?
I've had it with a site. Damn it, Simon. I've had it with a site hack before, which seems to be somebody else's experience too. I think with a lot of cases of this, I haven't had it to a massive extent, and I've just let Google sort it out itself. But yeah, with the site hack, that was something a bit more serious.
Okay. Sean, what about yourself? Do you have anything to add?
Just, it's John's here. In terms of, I think John's come out recently and said a few things. I believe that we should just, obviously, if it's a kind of hack situation, it might be different. But in terms of just toxic-based links, I would just ignore them and let Google handle that. I looked at kind of a couple of examples, and I think they would be ignored. I don't think Google is taken too seriously, in my opinion. Okay,
great. Natalia, what about yourself? What would you do in this situation?
I've not edited any disavow file in years, probably 4 or 5 years. I've not touched any. I wouldn't. Unless you suddenly see an impact of those links appearing correlated with a loss of traffic anywhere, maybe, but that would be very rare case. So I would just ignore. And I think there's a consensus in chat to actually check the hack. Both John and Simon have mentioned that, as well as just ignoring the links altogether.
Yeah, I hate it when I see stuff like this because it feels like such a waste of time, doesn't it? Somebody's gone about the web and done something like this to try and associate your website in some sort of way as something that's not great. What a waste of time. But hopefully you can spend time coming up with great campaigns and trying to outweigh these ones. Okay, so the question that was submitted here was very short. We had in-house or agency. Now I've interpreted that as 2 questions. It could be, should I build an in-house team or should I use an agency? Or do you recommend working in-house or agency? So feel free to answer either of those if you like, or both. But yeah, unfortunately, I just had in-house or agency ? And it was from an anonymous source on the website. David, you're smiling. In-house or agency? What are your thoughts?
So quite often I go into firms as a consultant, a contractor. I do occasionally go fully in-house, and that has its own benefits. I think with a good agency, you can surround yourself with people, and especially earlier on in your career, gather so much information which you may not get in-house. In-house can be, in some cases, in some industries, it's almost one digital person looking after the whole thing, and that can be tough.
And what about the other part of the question?
A hybrid.
A hybrid. Okay. Sean, what are your thoughts? In-house or agency?
Yeah, I work both. I think obviously agency is very fast paced. You could get tons of different clients, which gives you a very broad amount of skills, and you touch upon all different industries and stuff. It is quite exciting, but it's a lot of work usually, and you have to have a lot of strings to your bow. And in-house is probably more comfortable, but it could be slow paced. It could be frustrating at times, but you probably feel more comfortable generally. Depends on the brand and the industry. So I don't mind either. I guess now I prefer brand because it is a bit more in-house, because it is a bit more comfortable for me the way my life is and stuff. But it depends on what your preferences are.
And I'm assuming at Macmillan you have an SEO team that I know that you oversee. So you've obviously chosen to build out different skill sets. I'm just thinking of the other part of the question. So I'm assuming in your team you have technical people and content related and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, to be fair, we did rely on external agencies when I got here, and I did want to build a team internally rather than relying on external. But I guess that's more because of the external people I don't think are doing a good enough job. Rather than, I have no problem using these agencies. I think they're up to it.
That's a really valid point, actually. I've worked with a number of firms building in-house teams. I think it's also important for that in-house team to know when to look externally, whether it's a resource issue or a skills issue. Sometimes you do need to look externally, but yeah, finding the right agency is a whole other topic.
Great. Natalia, do you have any thoughts? In-house or agency?
My career is mostly agency. I think that comes from the fact I just recently got diagnosed with ADHD, and now it all makes sense. I like to jump from a subject to subject, industry to industry, so it always suited me perfectly. I feel like people who prefer to have deep focus on one thing could do better in-house. I'm not one of those people. And I have Simon here saying that agency, you get a lot of different experiences and you get to meet David, which is a benefit itself.
I've never heard that called a benefit before. Thank you, Simon.
You wouldn't get to get this benefit, it's everyone else, right?
So I've worked both. I was in-house for 11 years and I've been agency side for 5 years. And have worked with lots of agencies as well. And I love both. They're both great. And I recommend if you're at the beginning of your career, looking to try and get as many experiences as possible. I think like Simon would know, if you're working in-house, you get to get really involved in the project. You get to see all aspects of it. You've got a seat at the table when it comes to decision making that maybe you don't get as an agency partner. But then when you work for an agency, you get to try so many different things. So one minute I might be working on a migration, the next minute a link building campaign, the next minute strategy, and so on. It depends. But yeah, it does. Okay, great. And so the other thing, in-house team, again, I built in-house teams as well as used external partners. I think it depends on how long you're going to be using that skill set for, and whether that's likely to change in future. For example, originally I used to have lots of content people in-house, but then I realized that after about a year or a year and a half of writing about the same subject, particularly if they're not that passionate about it, they then lose that motivation, and actually using copywriters that are really passionate about that particular area makes sense. Whereas actually more technical roles, if you're in-house and you've got loads of complex websites and so on, then actually building an technical SEO team or getting some skill sets in-house makes sense. So I think it just depends on the project and what there is. Anything else in the chat before we jump on to the next one?
I think there's some questions popping up that we might actually add at the end. While we're here, I just want to say that we are 27 participants live for those who are listening to us on the recording. And if you would like to be part of this group and actually participate in the chat conversation, or maybe even put yourself forward to be one of the guests, please go to goodsignal.com/SEO Office Hours. That's my contribution for now. And let's see if anyone's typing. Should we go with one question from the chat, or should we continue?
Yeah, let's do it.
Riaz is asking, what are the potential SEO implications of switching to a new CMS platform like Sitecore? And how can we troubleshoot to mitigate any negative impact on search rankings? So follow up on the previous conversation we've had, but that's actually, I think it's a good one because it puts the CMS change into perspective. Anyone wants to pick this one up?
I'll say the main thing is, as soon as it's an initial thought with a business, make sure you get SEO involved. Don't bring them in 3 weeks before it launches. Don't bring them in 3 weeks after it launches, because they can get expensive at that stage, which is fine for me. So yeah, I'd say planning is absolutely key. You want to look at how the website is in its current state. You want to plan what exactly is the navigation, and just make sure you've got the time and the resource in place to do it properly.
Great. Sean, what have you got any extra thoughts on that?
Well, it's just the same as I said before, test environment, make sure it's all in place, collaboration with the other teams, creating new content that might not be on the old site, and make sure that's all accorded for in your plans and stuff, make sure that's all there. And also it can be, we always talk about negatives. I think sometimes it can be a benefit to change. We've seen, it's early days, but we've seen in our switches that actually we've had, and probably because Macmillan had some really strong sort of authoritative website, but we've seen a very good increase in terms of traffic and visibility and stuff in the migrations we've had. It can work both ways.
Great. So that's something we do here whenever we're doing a project like a migration where it has the potential to go wrong, but like I said, Sean, it can also be really positive, is that we do a thing called a pre-mortem, where we basically get key people that are involved in the project around a table, and we imagine that the project has failed, and we try and come up with all the reasons why it might have failed, and we just go round and round, and people quietly write down all the reasons on post-it notes, and then we go through them one at a time, and we try and prevent them and talk about how can we make sure this doesn't happen. And if it does happen, what do we need to do? And I find that we usually catch most issues that sort of crop up, but it can be a way of thinking about things that you wouldn't have thought of, especially if you've got other perspectives around the table that know the website better than you or know the history of the website. So yeah, that's how I would prepare for that. Anything in the chat, Natalia, before we head to the next question?
People are not very chatty today.
Simon's got a comment in there. It's just again about the planning so when you do a migration, ideally don't do CMS, brand, domain, URL change all in one go. Believe me, it gets very painful.
Yeah. And I think just assume everything's going to go well. I think that's happened a lot, where taken organic traffic for granted and just thought, actually, this will be faster, better, and so on, and then not thought about all the things that they're removing or changing. Okay, next question. Hi there. I've purchased a website with a simple structure. In the past, I've tested the power of silo structures on over 10 projects. The website that I've just purchased has got 200 plus pages and posts. So my question is it safe if I change from a simple structure to a silo one on the site that I've purchased? Has anybody changed the structure of a site? Do you have any thoughts on the type of structure? David, you're nodding.
I've done that a couple of times. Again, it depends on so many factors. I think especially if you've bought this website, I'd check out some of the history of it beforehand. But yeah, it has to be done very delicately. It's similar to a migration in many ways. Be sure of how you're doing the siloing. Think about what is changing. Think about how pages are going to be redirected. It can be done. It can be beneficial. It's not a simple, easy task for the most part.
Great. Sean, do you have any thoughts?
Again, similar to migrations we've done recently, you just got to think about how the user's going to experience the content, navigation, internal linking.
I think you've got something over the microphone again. Sorry.
I always have is that okay?
There you go. Thank you.
I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's just making sure it's all mapped out, all planned, and yeah, just remember the question again.
It was around the structure of a site. So they've basically purchased this website. It has a very simple structure at the moment, and in the past, when they've created websites or they've done this before, they've switched from the structure that it was to more of a silo structure. So I'm guessing where they remove links from each section and ensure that each of the silos of the site have lots of links pointing within that.
Just make sure user experience is correct, internal linking's all there. It's all mapped out before, and again, you can use testing environments to make sure that everything's working correctly before you go live.
Great. Natalia, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I have a follow-up question from Preeti in the chat, and I think it's a good one to add to this discussion. Is it really important to do the whole silo structure, though? This is the question, and I would say, to start with, depends on the industry. There's industries that are so complex, and there's navigation that makes no other sense than silo. And there's simple websites that you don't need to overdo it. So I hate to say it depends, but it depends.
Yeah, but I think that's true. So when I've worked on sites before, say for instance, they've got two very different products or two very different services, and therefore it's almost having two different websites. To me, it makes sense that those sections of the websites are pretty cut off from each other because it's not the same users. And actually what we want to avoid is somebody over in the B2C section, for example, being lost in the B2B section and getting the wrong information. So in my head, that makes sense. But if it wouldn't be confusing to the user to be in another part of the website and actually they might want to find out more about the other sections, then like Sean was saying, I would just do what's best for the user and just make sure that your most important pages are prominent so that people can easily access them. I think that to me would make sense. Great. Okay, should we move to the next one? We've done that one. Okay, let's grab a few of these. Oh, flying through them. Do you know what? I think it's Jo. She's holding us back. Obviously, we're flying through the question.
You'll be in so much trouble when she comes back.
Also, I've not said half of the things I was supposed to. So.
You know what? We'll know if Jo's watched us now because she'll say to me, I can't believe you said that. Okay, next question. The cost of search engines retrieving data has been mentioned recently. How important is this to crawl budget and what impact will it have on SEO in the future? Would anybody like to just kick off on this one?
Just an initial thought hearing that is if there wasn't another excuse to make sure your website was well structured, optimized and targeted to your audience, that's it. If there's any chance of limitations with crawling a larger website, you want to be in a place where your website is as accessible as possible.
Great. I agree. Anybody else?
Can you hear me okay?
Let's go for it, Sean.
So obviously Mike King's come out recently and said about how difficult it is. And we've all seen it, I guess. Indexing right now, getting your page indexed is more difficult than ever. And David was saying, this is the best time now to prune all your content. And if there's anything that doesn't really need to be there, just get rid of it. If it needs to be updated, update it. If it needs to be consolidated, do that. But you need to make the most out of the content you have on the site. And if you want the main pages to be visible, you have to make sure they're worthy of being visible.
I've said at a number of firms in the past, look at pretty much every page and just ask yourself, why is it there? What is its purpose? What is it going to do for the business? It's a horrible task, but especially with bigger sites, but it's worth it.
Yeah. Natalia, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'm going to add a different perspective to all that's been said, because I think it's also a question of ecology and sustainability. And I think we're going to have to move towards that. So more you can just throw away because it brings no value, the better for everyone, for the planet, for the users, for search engines to index. So there's many reasons to be minimalist in your approach and not just produce masses of nothing. Not to swear, I don't want to say the S word, but there's too much of this now. And I think the trend worldwide has to be going more quality and in depth without just producing multiples of bad quality stuff. So if you're not convinced by a crawl budget or whatever the term is, sustainability might be it.
Do you know what? It's funny, every project that I work on, whenever we first start, the first thing I do is look in. I'll do this for analytics from just an overall traffic perspective, but also Search Console from a organic. I'll look at how many pages of the site is actually important. I've worked on sites that range from 15 pages up to hundreds of thousands of pages. And it's always the same. There's only a small percentage of the pages that really matter to the business. And the rest are just, and one of the things that I try and do is look through and think, are these pages really important to the business? And if they're not, can we either make them better or can we get rid and redirect and so on? I always think it's better to have a smaller, more manageable website rather than something huge.
Just very briefly, the other side is, having worked in legal and regulatory industries as well, make sure you don't have content that is, from a legal or regulatory point of view, out of date, being seen by potential clients, existing clients, because that gets very painful as well.
Yeah. And in terms of my answer to these questions, I've always thought that for the last however long I've worked in this industry, those pages that are really important to the business, I just protect them. I monitor them like anything. I make sure they're prominent. I make sure they're up to date. I make sure they're really, really good. And that's what I would suggest here, rather than worrying too much about what's in the news. I would focus more on just your site and making it better. Is it just me?
Simon is disagreeing with us. I'm in a small camp that says don't prune. And it's fair to say there will be different approaches. Every SEO will have their own preference. I'm the minimalist one, but I understand people have had success with more content than less. And it depends as well on many things. And Simon did say it depends.
Yeah. See, I'm a pruner. I prune quite a lot, but at the same time, pruning for me, it's either a lot of the time, it's also just improve what's there. And also sometimes there might be some pages that when I'm saying I prune content, not just those that don't get traffic, because sometimes you might be helping just a few people with those pages. It's more just the pages that aren't great. Is it just me or have we lost Sean?
Yeah.
What did you say to him?
I don't
You
know.
upset him?
We must have done.
He decided to prune on the guests.
We've pruned the speakers.
I know. Okay, next question. We have, okay, how do we diagnose and fix a sudden drop in organic traffic for a website? Can we recover in 1 to 2 months? Can you recommend any tools for any websites to identify the main reasons for the drop? Unfortunately, we haven't been given a URL, which for questions like this, if you provide a URL, it makes it a lot easier because then we can try and support in a way. David or Natalia, do you have any thoughts?
I'd say first thing, as with any sudden changes, don't panic. Dive into the data, try and get a sense of what's happening. There's some great articles. Whenever I hear this, I always think of Alida Solis, who has written some great stuff about this. I think one of her blog posts shows up every time somebody looks for this. But yeah, I have a look and try and find what the cause is. Look through the data. Don't make any rash decisions and try and see what's coming out of there. Sometimes I've had instances where traffic drops have just been a fundamental change in what people were looking for. There were certain terms, topics that were highly popular, and the drop in those was significant to set up a few alerts.
Great. Natalia, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, it's a very good response. I'm just going to say to be maybe more proactive about the tools and just go to Search Console and you'll have all the answers. Because remember, it's not website dropping, it's pages. Because Google ranks pages. So find out what has actually dropped. And you might actually find there's a pattern, there's a template type that dropped because maybe you've made a change. Maybe there's a particular keyword query or a group of queries that are specifically affected. And that should give you a lot to analyze. So identify first what has dropped.
And also competitor activity is also one. Suddenly a competitor gets a new digital team or hires an exceptional consultant like Simon Cox. And before you know it, they start really appearing high up in those rankings. You start dropping down. And that does have an impact on your traffic.
He's back. We've got Sean back. Let me just put you back to the call. Sean, you missed the question, but the question basically is, how would you diagnose a sudden drop in organic traffic for a website? And is it possible to recover in 1 to 2 months? Whilst you think about that, I won't put you on the spot. I'll give my thoughts. David and Natalia have just given theirs. For what it's worth, Kaylee on my team did a blog post on exactly this. Sorry, I don't usually do the whole self-promotional thing, but there you go. There's a whole thing on this, and it covers it ranging from actually, was there a traffic drop or is it an issue with tracking and analytics, going through to has there been a shift in search intent for what you do? I know during COVID, lots of businesses.
Seasonality, which I think is also very undervalued impact on your traffic. I actually have a fun one to share. I had that a couple of years ago when I was working for this client that sells boilers. And they came to me, they were like, we have a traffic drop year on year. Why October is not seeing the same traffic figures? And it's because September that year has been way colder. So the traffic has happened earlier. So when you compare year on year, you think there's a drop. When you compare 3-month periods, they were actually up, just different periods of time because the cold affects the boiler purchasing decisions. So seasonality often is one of the unexpected answers as well, if you haven't found anything else, obviously.
I think also just checking with your marketing or IT team to see if there's been any major changes recently.
I had one where I was asked to investigate, and it was simply that they put in the cookie consent and it had blocked it. And that was the reason why in analytics it was showing it was actually about an 80% drop in traffic.
Yeah, I've had that exact same issue. That's where Google Search Console is obviously really good because it's different data. So it gets it from the search results. So it's quite helpful to be able to compare analytics and Search Console data. We also had it where a client had basically released a new version of the staging site essentially, and the devs didn't take off the no index tags and things like that. If there are loads of crawling tools like Screaming Frog and so on that can pick up these things pretty quickly. But yeah, that post's really good. Sean, what about, oh, there you go. David's got the Screaming Frog t-shirt on there. Not enough people throw t-shirts and stuff at me. I was like, these guys got 15 pairs of socks this year from different things. I haven't even got one. What's going on?
I shouldn't say. I've got about 10 Google t-shirts and Google bags and Google notepads and pens. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Sean, what about you? What about you? If in terms of diagnosing a traffic drop, any additional thoughts to what we said?
Sure. Yeah, I think first of all, it's been said already, but initially you have to find if there is actually a problem. This is why forecasting and looking at historical data actually helps, because you understand these yearly trends and patterns. And also, a big thing we do at Macmillan is annotate, making sure that we understand internally and externally anything that could potentially factor in the change of traffic. Say there's new content being created, or campaigns going live, or campaigns that ended, or paid campaign, less spend on certain campaigns, external factors. Obviously, it could be a massive pandemic, it could be an election, or, for example, at Macmillan, obviously, with the King getting cancer recently, that we had a massive spike in traffic for obvious reasons, and that was nothing we really did. And then also, funny one is I used to work for a refurbished phone company, and when it rained, we actually saw better sales. When it was really sunny, everyone was about, they weren't really buying phones online. So we actually were praying for rain sometimes. There's those things. And then also, looking at, as you say, using tools and making sure, obviously looking at competition in the market. If you do see a drop in traffic, but if all your competition are also seeing drops and the market is generally, then obviously there's nothing much wrong with what you're doing. And also looking at if you've been penalized by Google for anything, like technical issues and that kind of thing. Just to identify those kind of so on. So it could be a mix of anything, but generally, first of all, you have to find there is actually an issue. A lot of times the alarm bells go off, and actually it's a seasonal thing, or there's something in the news, or it could be a bit like we had. Again, I'll go to the phone company, but we had, if anyone remembers, that I don't know if it's still going actually, but the website Hot Deals, and someone had posted about
microphone again, Sean.
So on the
deals we're talking about.
Yeah, and it just went off, and we started selling all this one particular iPhone, and we didn't have enough to sell, so we had to cut that particular sale, and that was just because of a bit of press. So you have to keep an eye on these things.
Yeah. When you were talking about the weather, it reminded me of when I used to work for a company that does corporate events. And the same thing, if the sunshine was out, people were not searching to plan a corporate event. They were probably out in the sunshine enjoying a nice long boozy lunch or something like that. When I realized there was that connection, we used to send out emails to London-based businesses where we'd say, the sun's out, we're going to buy the whole office ice creams. And so we used to go get our sales team delivering ice creams to people, just because we could see it was really quiet during those periods. Just to pick up on what you said about paid media, actually, I think that's one thing that I've noticed when people say we've seen a huge drop in organic traffic. And then I've noticed the paid media team have turned on branded searches, and therefore that same traffic has just moved to paid instead. They haven't spent a lot of money on it, but it just helps them realize. So you made me think of that when that was the case. Anything else on this before we move on? No? Okay, we've got two more. We'll do two more questions. I'll try and find one that... Okay, so somebody said here that they're applying for a job role in digital marketing with a well-known brand and market leader. In your opinion, is there any point in bringing up SEO as part of their strategy, or would that be a waste of time just because they're already so well known in their space? Would you do that if you're interviewing?
I'd say don't take fame for granted. I think it's always, it depends. I said it. Yeah, it depends on the company. It depends if you're going in for an interview, if you have a look at the website, if you find something particularly of note, I'd definitely mention it. It's a key part of digital marketing.
Yeah. Natalia, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, because I wouldn't imagine a company that wouldn't want to improve their SEO. If you have loads and you get 2% more than loads, you are still winning. And actually, remember, it's about optimizing. The more you have, the easier it is to scale it up. Actually, the smallest tiny websites are usually the hardest for SEO work, and the big brands, a programmatic change or a scalable change can really make a huge difference. So definitely do that. Definitely mention it, especially if you feel like you can contribute with SEO subjects. So, but obviously, we are biased. We are SEO people. What else?
Sean, you work for a big brand that are really well known, and obviously SEO is important to that organization.
Yeah, organic always has a place, as has been mentioned. And even though you are a big brand, that doesn't always mean like, you still need good content and to have the right brand awareness online. However, you do also have to go where your audience is. Obviously, there is always more that's organically for every sort of audience.
All right, microphone again. I just get a button or something to say microphone.
Connect my proper microphone next time. Yes, you got to go where your audience is, but there is always a place for organic. But also, you can look at, it depends what the organization is, what industry they're in, and it might be that you focus more on certain social media platforms or direct mail or whatever it is, TV or whatever it is. So yeah.
So most big brands that I've ever come into contact with have some sort of SEO or organic team. I think I could be wrong, but I think even Google has an in-house SEO team. No, okay, I've been told no. But for instance, we had Rob, who's head of organic for Virgin Media and O2 on a few weeks ago, and he has a whole organic team. And obviously it depends on the business, but in their case, they've got loads of local stores. They want people to be able to find those stores. People also purchase the product online. So I guess in terms of the industry and whether there is a search appetite, I would say that's where that's really important. Okay, let's go on to our final regular question, which I've lost. Here it is, which is, what are you most excited about in terms of SEO at the moment? Natalia, as co-host this week, what are you most excited about?
I have to say this with pain in my heart, because I can see John on the call. But I'm really excited that maybe the search engine market this year is going to look a bit different. I'm a huge fan of indie search engines, and I would like to see more diversity. Nothing personal against Google. I just like diversity to be there everywhere, internet included. So maybe it's about time that maybe Google loses a little bit of market share and we can see more players in, so it becomes more interesting.
That Natalia's website drops 3 places.
Good time.
There's just links pointed to the site now. Sean, what are you most excited about in terms of SEO at the moment?
Yeah, that was controversial. Yeah, I think personally that I know there's a lot of issues at the moment, but I do think it is going in the right direction. I think when we get more personalization for users, it's going to be beneficial. I'm looking forward to that, because a lot of our services and content is around really personal sort of issues. And I think the more personalized we get, the better user experience will be. So I think if search engines go towards that direction, it'll be better for everyone.
Great. David, what are you most excited about in terms of SEO?
I will say I agree with what Natalia said very bravely. But I think for me, it's around more and more promotion. I'm hearing about the quality of sites, quality of content, accessibility as well of websites. I think the more this comes out, the better. And I think with EAT and other elements, that's getting to the businesses to mean that when they do update their website, they're thinking of more than just, we want to put this on the website.
Great. Mary's just said, and events on behalf of Joe, which Joe says every week, events. Yes, 100%. Can I just say thank you to those who have been putting information into the spreadsheet for Natalie from Somerset Blooms. I don't know if you've seen the spreadsheet, but there's lots of info in there from others. Oh, let me just quickly put it in the chat because I can see you're saying no. Thank you to everyone that did that. That was really nice.
I also want to say that those who asked questions in the chat just recently, but we didn't get to them, please submit them for the next week or next weeks, because there were some good questions about multilingual SEO and other topics that we just didn't have time now to cover, but they were good questions.
That was a very good question.
I will make sure we ask that next week. Thank you so much to everybody for taking part. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you so much to those of you that joined live and have shared perspectives, watched, submitted questions. Thank you to those watching afterwards. Thank you so much to our co-host this week, Natalia. I know this won't be the last time you're on. Thank you so much.
You have done well enough.
Yeah, of course. I hope everybody has a lovely weekend. Thank you so much. See you next week.
Yeah, thanks.